Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the virtual open house for the 600 and 700 North Mobility, Safety, and Transit Improvement Study. We're coming to you live Thursday, June 18th. This presentation will be recorded and made available on our project website, though, if you're unable to join us live. My name is Kyle Cook. I'm an engineer in the city's transportation division. It's good to be here with you, talking today about this project. Something that I've been thinking about a lot, and I know that if you're joining us, it's probably important to you too. So with me today, I have several people who live and work in the Rose Park and Fair Park neighborhoods. These are folks that are actively working with me to inform and guide our corridor study. So would you guys like to take a minute to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Greg Sanchez. I'm a member of the Salt Lake City Transportation Advisory Board and a resident of Rose Park.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Maria Garcia, and I'm the CEO of NEIGHBORHOO Salt Lake. And NEIGHBORHOO Salt Lake is a nonprofit organization that does community development, and we've been serving Salt Lake City neighborhoods since 1977.
Hi, I'm Kevin Park. I'm chair of the Rose Park Community Council and a 20-year resident of Rose Park.
Good morning, I'm Corky Reister. I am chair of the Transportation Advisory Board, a member of the Rose Park Community Council, and a very happy neighbor to be here.
Hey, I'm Tim Sullivan. I am with Township and Range. I'm the project manager of the consultant team for this project, which also includes parametrics, alta planning and design, and landmark design.
And my name is Adan Carrillo. I do civic engagement with the engineering division and transportation here with the city.
All right, well, thanks everyone. Appreciate our speakers being with us today, and I appreciate our audience for taking the time to join us today. So as far as what you can expect, this format will be initially a little bit similar to a webinar. We're going to present some background information, and then we're going to switch to more of a conversational roundtable and take some Q&A. So our primary objective is to introduce you to the project and connect you with some of the tools that we've developed to help educate and gather some feedback. So our team will be monitoring the chat window, looking for Q&A topics that we can address after this initial presentation. We do have a limited amount of time, so if your comment isn't addressed, please keep an eye on the project website where we'll post additional information about the project and try to backfill any responses we weren't able to get to. So again, we really appreciate your time, and we're going to switch now to the presentation. Okay, and you should be seeing a slide here. So, as many of you know, the 600 and 700 North Corridor is a street in Northwest Salt Lake County, and it's a critical connection for residents, commuters, visitors. It accesses neighborhoods, schools, employers, parks. A lot of stuff is going on here. So this corridor is important for both transportation and the places along it. This links several neighborhoods together: West Point, Jordan Meadows, Rose Park, Fair Park on the west side of I-15, and the Capitol Hill and Marmalade areas on the east side of I-15. And we know that because this corridor has freeway interchanges at I-15 and I-215, it's really important for regional access as well. So what are we trying to accomplish? What is this project all about? Well, fundamentally, we want to preserve and enhance the things that are working on this corridor, things that people love. We want to fix the problems and pursue the best opportunities for ways to address some of the issues that we've heard about over time. That includes concerns expressed from residents in the area about safety and speeding traffic. We know that there's been some tragic incidents where people have been hit along the corridor. But we also know that there's a lot of close calls that don't go unreported. So we understand that there's generally a sense of lack of safety, lack of comfort. I kind of use the term, it's a confused road in the sense that it comes right off of a freeway and it's got, it's 5 lanes wide. It feels like it encourages high levels of comfort for drivers so that they can go fast, but it also has lots of residential driveways along the street. It provides that local access. So we're really trying to figure out how to balance this issue of regional mobility and local access. But ultimately, we're working with the community and stakeholders to identify specific projects that can be implemented over time, including a rollout of a new bus service that's going to go along the corridor next year. So we're trying to understand where to place those stops. So what's a corridor plan? Well, one of the things that I find really interesting about transportation planning is that it sits within so many areas of overlapping interests. So a corridor plan looks at a lot more than just pavement and lane markings. In the planning process, we consider first, what kind of behavior and activities do we want to encourage? And then we think about the kinds of designs that get us there. So for example, curb extensions or gateway features we can use to help calm traffic and reduce vehicle speeds. Think about neighborhood assets. We want to understand, what we can really leverage and help flourish. So incorporating local art or leveraging wide park strips for landscaping and greening are things that we'd be looking at. So every corridor has specific needs. And, for example, we can't just apply lessons learned from a project on Sunnyside to 600 North. So this list, which I'm not going to read through one by one, but it gives you a sense for the things that we'd be trying to look at and incorporate into a systematic plan.
And I think one of the things that we're trying to do with the corridor plan is to make sure that the street is reflecting the communities that it serves. So, the neighborhoods alongside at the destination that it links to, and right now, there's aspects of the 600, 700 North corridor that aren't necessarily reflecting the community, and so we want to really look at the context that the street goes through, and see how we can really better reflect the community needs.
Absolutely. So let's talk about kind of the phases of this project. So we have 3 phases. It's sort of a beginning, a middle, and an end. So over the spring, we've been gathering information about the corridor and trying to get feedback about priorities. And frankly, that's part of what we're trying to do today. This summer, we're going to be developing some ideas for solutions. And then later on in the fall, and as we go into the winter, we're going to be trying to pick the best ideas and put them together into a plan. The idea is that we would iteratively reach out to the community in each phase to initially get input, but then to help us refine the alternatives, then later confirm that the designs are as good as they can be. So this project is guided by a stakeholder committee comprised of community leaders, city and agency staff, UDOT, UTA, for example, and a lot of these folks are here with us today. So the first step in the process, we gathered and established some goals for the corridor in the surrounding area. And this is a really important first step because we know that some of these goals are going to be in conflict. And this is foundational to the discussion about trade-offs, priorities.
And I just want to talk a little bit more about, how we're going to be using these goals. And I will also say that we were really lucky to be able to have a meeting in person to start off with back in the very early part of March, to really, get this group to really gel, because this group of stakeholders is really the backbone of the project. And so the discussion that we had was really the launching point for creating these goals. And I just want to talk a little bit about how we're going to be using these goals. They're going to tell us what to analyze. As a consultant team, it's really going to be our directive in how to look for what exactly we should be looking at on this corridor. What aspects of transportation, the different, walking, bicycling, driving freight, transit, the land use, the other aspects of the community. So the goals are very important in that sense. They help frame the trade-offs that we're going to be looking at. For example, what are the trade-offs between serving, the broader region? And this is an important corridor for the region. It's also an extremely important neighborhood street. So what are those trade-offs between the city and the region? And there are all sorts of different things that our group is going to have to grapple with. It's going to help us develop ideas for the corridor concepts. And then they're also going to help us evaluate different concepts and which concepts really help achieve the goals in the best way.
Thanks, Tim. Let's jump in and talk a little bit about these goals. They're organized into 4 main themes of connections, livable neighborhoods, transportation choices, and implementation. Now, the documentation for the specific goals and how we got there is on our project website. And this is something that we have a live survey that's live. It's closing at the end of the month. It'd be great to have you go out and take a look at those goal statements and give us your feedback on how they resonate with you and how you sort of rank them relative to each other. I'm just going to talk in some broad terms about what these things mean. So fundamentally, the corridor facilitates east-west travel for local and regional trips. So it's an important part of the street network.
And this has really been called, oh, so I'm sorry, it's really been called the lifeblood of the community by our stakeholder group.
Yeah, and it's important for any movement. So, obviously driving, but walking, bicycling, transit. It's going to continue to be an investment in the corridor. So these are all things that we're interested in. Freight is also one that's kind of sometimes the stepchild, where trucks are very loud, particularly east of I-15. And create, would be very uncomfortable for this pedestrian, for example, to be in that area. So we're trying to find a balance with those things. We also want to link the neighborhoods across the corridor. 6 North we've heard comments that it almost acts as a barrier between neighborhoods to the north and south side. So we're looking for ways to create better connections. Like, as an example, pedestrian crossings, mid-block, and at intersections are a way to do that. And still on this theme of connections, it's just important to acknowledge the function of the corridor in terms of regional mobility. So this is particularly important at the junctions with I-15 and 215. I-15 is a major access Okay, so the second theme is livable neighborhoods. Now, we recognize that this corridor is more than just a transportation conduit. Nature of the street is a key part of what makes the places along the corridor inviting and accessible. So, look of the corridor is important too. So we want to create a beautiful street with great places we'll have pride in. So how do we do that?
And there's been a lot of talk about gateways, I think, with our group, and how to create a great gateway into the different neighborhoods along the corridor. And it's not necessarily just a sign, but it's also just kind of creating that welcoming atmosphere into neighborhoods. And how do we do that with the street design?
Right. And we also have this gem of open space here at the Jordan River Parkway and Riverside Park. So how do we improve access to this and accommodate the high demands for parking that happen during events and on weekends, and really leverage this as a community asset? And then lastly, we know that the corridor has a couple of great commercial areas and nodes. So how do we make these areas more walkable and accessible and grow them in a way that's balanced with the corridor's residential character. So the last theme that I want to focus on is transportation choices, because fundamentally, we understand that as we grow, it's important to provide choices in travel to reduce dependence on automobiles. So we know that if done well, this has a lot of positive implications like public health, air quality, and quality of life, which means that our study will be looking for ways to broaden the sets of choices for how to get around. And we see two main opportunities for this. First one is bus transit. So at the center of the city's transit master plan is what's called the frequent transit network. And the idea behind this is to create a network of linear routes spaced about a half mile apart and that all have the same or similar characteristics in terms of how often they come along, say every 15 minutes, and the service span. So how late do they run into the night, start early in the morning, do they run on the weekends? And this consistency creates a service that's so simple that you really don't even need a schedule. So the 600 and 700 North Corridor are part of that frequent transit network, as is 10th North.
And I think when we talk about supporting the frequent transit network, we're talking about creating a really good environment for bus operations so people can get where they're going faster. Also improving pedestrian and bicycle access to the stops, and also creating better waiting environments with more amenities for transit riders. So these are kind of some of the things that we can think about in how we support that increased level of service that Kyle's talking about.
Now, the other opportunity is through improving walking and the bicycling experience along the corridor. So the corridor has a bike lane, but it isn't consistent, for example, as evidenced through this area near Backman Elementary, where this individual felt more comfortable riding on the sidewalk. And that's something that is indicative of the fact that the facility, the bike lane just either isn't there or isn't comfortable to be in. So that's something that we'll be looking to address.
Yeah, a lot of what we hear from people is there's not a consistent way to bike along this corridor, that the bike lane kind of comes and goes, that you have to move all over the street. And I think a lot of what we want to do is just create a better, consistent bicycling experience on this corridor.
Right. And the I-15 interchange is an example of a major barrier that we hear a lot about. Getting across this on bike or foot can be pretty terrifying. And so this is a barrier that our project is looking to find solutions for. The last thing I'll say briefly is, we want to integrate these different ideas that come together in a comprehensive solution for the corridor. And we want to create consistency, and we want to create a game plan that, while we know maybe everything can't be built at once, we'll be looking for some quick wins and opportunities to phase in transformation on these projects over time.
And I think, two things with this goal, how it came to be is, if you look at the infrastructure along 600 and 700 North, it's kind of a patchwork in a lot of ways. Some things are misaligned, inconsistent. A lot of, like, for example, the bike lane that we were just talking about. And I think it's important to create just a kind of an overall more consistent geometry on the street. The second thing is just to make sure that we're connecting all the different initiatives of the communities along the corridor, so that we have everything coordinated, that we're leveraging different things, community efforts on this corridor.
Yep. And we're here today to say, hey, we want to hear from you. Which priorities are the most important to you? What are your ideas for achieving them? What are we missing? So I'll leave the project website up here for a minute. Right now we have a questionnaire that's closing towards the end of the month. Really interested to hear your feedback on what's important to enhance or preserve. What do you want to change? We have a comment map where you can provide comments on specific locations. And this is where we're going to be continuing to put information about the project. Given everything that's happened over the last few months with COVID-19, our original goal of getting out into the community and attending events where people are has been really disrupted. So we're relying on online platforms, and our project website is one space where we're going to continue to push information out and have dialogue there. Okay, so that's going to be the end of our formal presentation. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I think this would be a great time for our invited guests to sort of roundtable on sort of your experiences, interests in the neighborhood and in the corridor study. So if we want to go in the same order of intros, Greg, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. So this corridor is a road I take when I'm going to work, when I go into the city, when I go visit relatives, when I go shopping. So it's very important to me, but I also like to go biking on it. I like to use it for recreational activities, whether running with my dog or cycling into the city. I did go over I-15 once on 600 North, and that was not fun. So now I take other routes, which also are not direct. So I just would love to see this corridor improved into something that's more than just for cars. We have two huge interchanges. Cars want to go so fast. And I think that it should be more designed for the people, for the community, for all the people that live on 600 North or 700 North. And it'll be a great asset to our community to convert it into something that's more for pedestrians, for families, where kids can be safe to go to the park and not have to worry about the sidewalks where as soon as the sidewalk ends, the road's right there and cars are speeding through there. So this is important for me because I think it has great potential in our community to make it a better place to live.
And Greg brings up a great point about serving people versus serving vehicles. You know, for a lot of the stretches of 600, 700 North, just in looking at it as a consultant team, we found that, you know, there is kind of an imbalance of person space and traffic space. You know, it varies, but, you know, say only around 20% of the cross section of the street really is dedicated to people. Whereas, you know, more like 60 to 70, 75% is dedicated to traffic lanes. So we need to just take a look at that distribution of space and see if that's kind of what we want, or if we want to create more space for people.
So, do you want me to go next, Kyle?
Yeah, that would be great. Thanks, Maria.
So, you know, as I think about this transportation plan and the goals, like Greg, when I drive on 600 North, I try to be very careful and very thoughtful about not speeding, but it's such a wide road that sometimes you just want to get from one end to the other. So I'm really thoughtful about trying to slow down and appreciate what's on both sides of the road. When I ride my bike, I feel as safe. And then when I walk, it seems like it takes forever, and there's not much to see outside of a road, even though there's some beautiful assets on both sides of the road. From a community development perspective, when I think of the goals and I think about connectivity, the importance of connecting the east side and the west side is so critical. There's so many barriers on the west side. If you think of the tracks, if you think of the freeways, this is a main corridor. If we can really create that transition, would be fantastic, I think, for both east side and west side. When I think about transportation choices, I hear from residents all the time about the lack of choices for transportation. So to be intentional and thoughtful about offering more choices, I think is fantastic. And then I think about recognizing all the assets in the neighborhood. When you're talking about livable neighborhoods, we have the Jordan River, we have the parks, you have some beautiful homes along 600, 700 North that people just drive past. So I'm excited with the goals, but also the objectives and the action steps to try and get there. I think most important is implementation and how transportation in the city will execute on this.
Kyle, do you want to talk a little bit about that kind of implementation, execution, just kind of the details of how this will be kind of implemented, just in a little more kind of a little more detail?
Yeah, and what I'll say is that funding, well, number one, transportation infrastructure is expensive. And number two, we oftentimes don't have one single funding source to help fund these projects. And so one of the things that I really admire about our group here in the transportation division is they're pretty tenacious about getting out and looking for funding resources. We've been talking with UDOT about they have a program that awards funds to local governments through TIF, TTIF, and TIF Active. And we've recently got some awards specifically for this corridor to fund transit bus shelter improvements and to improve access for active modes along the corridor. So those are some recent funding sources we've just gone out and asked for and looked for, and competitive processes. We've also got funding channels through the city through a variety of different programs like the CIP or Funding Our Future. But we understand that this is an important corridor, and I think there's been a change, or at least a recognition that there's historically not been enough investment in transportation infrastructure that supports good quality of life and safety and good neighborhood amenities on the west side. And so this project is, I think, a cornerstone of a larger effort to make improvements on the west side. That, again, they're kind of couched as transportation projects, but as I said, there's so much that goes into a corridor plan that's not just pavement and lane stripes, right? So that's kind of a long answer, but I think, again, the point is we've secured some funding already. We're going to continue to do that and develop a phasing plan so that as things come in, things are coherent and consistent. We don't have a north-south bike lane line up, location where we don't have a crosswalk. We want things to line up and do it coherently. But yeah, Maria, those are great thoughts. Kevin, do you want to jump in?
Sure, that'd be great. Thank you. We drive, as a family, we drive this corridor a lot. And we also spend a lot of time in Riverside Park. And on any given night in pre-COVID days, you could see baseball games going on and football and lacrosse and soccer. And on weekends, there's always soccer tournaments. But because of the lack of parking there and the speed on 600, 700 North, it's just a matter of time before someone is seriously injured. There's people park on that right on the road, and there's kids coming out and getting in the car, and it's been a concern of mine for a long time that someone is going to get hurt. And even the crosswalk that's on the Jordan River Parkway Trail is pretty scary to cross. So I'm excited about this discussion and the potential changes and things. I'm hoping for some things that will calm the traffic in that area and beautify the community, because Riverside Park is a real gem and a great asset to the community. And I think improving 600, 700 North could only add to that.
One of the emailed Q&A comments that I got yesterday was from someone. They said, well, why isn't the bike lane continuous around Riverside Park, 13th West and Redwood? And I don't have all the perfect history on this corridor, but my understanding is that part of the reason the lane drops is to accommodate the on-street parking around Riverside Park, to accommodate what you're talking about, Kevin, those high peak the usage of that park on weekends when you've got a lot of events. Sandlot baseball tournament, for example, is one we love. But soccer fields get super busy. And so here we are in a situation where we drop our bike lanes so we can accommodate on-street parking, but even that's not working great, right? We're talking about people loading and unloading right next to moving traffic. It's going pretty fast on a curve with not great sight distance. Seems like an obvious opportunity for improvement.
Yeah, I mean, this is an example where so many aspects of the corridor are connected. You know, this Backman Elementary, Riverside Park, you know, area is really kind of emerged as one of the core, you know, kind of centers of the destinations of the corridor, you know, and how do you improve pedestrian bike access at the same time as calming traffic, at the same time as maybe providing a little, just kind of better parking resources for those who are driving, improving transit. How do we do this all together and also kind of improve, really leverage this place that we have on the corridor and make the street reflect that and serve that place a little bit better?
So Corky, would you like to weigh in?
Sure. So safety has been a major concern along that corridor. As was brought up, we've had many pedestrian accidents and a few fatalities. And the community council was implemented the CIP funds to get the pedestrian crosswalk improvements on 800 West and 600 North. Community council does the cleanup on the overpass twice a year pre-COVID days, and it's hard to accommodate for the traffic, for the pedestrians, for making it a better community for everybody if we don't feel safe doing so. Somebody brought up the fact that 21st South near Sugar House Park is 30 miles an hour because there's a park there, even though the street is extremely wide. And they've got a lot of the similar issues in that area as we do over here, but it is 30 miles an hour. Whereas our street is 35. And people, like Maria said, people want to get from one side to the other pretty quickly. And you've got this nice wide road that makes you think that that's a possibility to do. So it's hard to determine which should be levered up to the front when it comes to safety. Is it bicycles? Is it kids? Is it pedestrians? And it is a car corridor. It always has been. And it connects two different freeways. So we've got to figure out how to balance all of that together. And traffic calming and artwork and investment in community beautification and identity, I think, is a great way to start that conversation.
And you know, we've looked at the the speeding issue, you know, as a consultant team, and we found that from some data the city collected about 1 year ago, 50 to 70% of cars were going over that 35 mile an hour speed limit.
That's been one of the biggest concerns that I've had about, you know, how do we enforce this? We've got a driver feedback sign coming off of the freeway overpass into the west side of the freeway, but there isn't anything that slows it down. I mean, people see that sign as a woohoo, let's go, let's see how fast we can get going. But there's no enforcement about the traffic, and that should be something that we need to really look at.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the speed really is people are responding to the design of the road, and a lot of the way this is going to change is through kind of redesigning the road and kind of adding in some of those other elements. And Corky, as you're saying, that's the critical thing, is thinking about how it can be a balance.
I think the other thing that I would add to what Corky said and the rest of the panel is Salt Lake City Transportation has its opportunity to bring a lot of the other departments to the table to support this plan, like economic development. How do we invest in the commercial nodes that are there? I think when you think about Smith's, you just see parking lot, right? There could be some wonderful landscape along that sitting parking strip. There's opportunity to partner with the Jordan River Commission to see how they can complement with the connectivity. The community councils on the west side are very involved, very engaged. There's just so many opportunities because we're focusing on regional. You have all these businesses like L3, all these other companies that I think we should engage in helping with this plan. And again, I think about that because I'm a not-for-profit, and we always think about how do we leverage public dollars with private dollars. And so I think I always think about implementation and how do we execute and where the money's coming from. And there's always limited government dollars, as we just went through the budget process with the city. And transportation is critical. And what I have always appreciated about transportation is when they have a plan, they do execute on the plan, having lived through the North Temple tracks. So I'm excited about this plan, that we actually have a plan. The neighborhood has known for a long time we need to do something. And so moving forward, think about all the opportunities to bring other partners to the table to make it happen.
Okay. Well, it's my understanding we've got a fair number of questions that are starting to come in, or that have been coming in. So I think this would be a good spot to kind of pause on the roundtable and switch over to Q&A. And I would obviously encourage our guests to welcome to chime in on anything that you want to.
So should we jump into it?
Yeah.
All right. So question one is from Sean on Facebook. Living on 600 North, right off the freeway interchange, there's a lot of traffic on this corridor. Is there a reason there's not an off-ramp on 1000 North, northbound I-15? There's an on-ramp, both north and southbound, and an off-ramp southbound.
Interesting. You know, this is probably something that we'll want to look into a little bit more. Offhand, I don't really know, other than there are some national standards for spacing of freeway interchanges. The reason interstates flow is because they don't have access points every block, right? And so, you know, it's a UDOT facility adhering to national interstate standards, Federal Highway Administration. So I don't know exactly why that interchange is configured that way. It's also in a constrained geographic area with the railroad. I got a question. Well, but clearly it has a lot of implications for the way that 6 North is used, and we know that our data shows that 6 North has a lot of heavy truck traffic that could potentially be that's oriented towards destinations to the north of 6 North. So if there were interchanges north of 6 North that were planned for them, we could potentially pull traffic off of 6 North interchange. So
it's actually a great segue into question number 2, which is from Walter on Facebook. Trucks are the issue east of I-15 at 600, 700 North. How will this new corridor help?
Whew, that's a toughie. It really is.
I think one thing you've said, Kyle, is you know, that's a potential thing to look toward, is, you know, potentially to look at other interchanges. But I think ultimately, like, there's going to have to be some truck traffic that's coming through here. I will say that we've looked at the truck movements, and, you know, there are turning movements off of 600 North East 515 that very heavily truck movements. And I think maybe looking at the traffic operations to really streamline those movements a little bit more and make those intersections more pedestrian friendly at the same time, to really try to protect the pedestrians from that truck traffic, and make the overall street design more pedestrian friendly while still accommodating the truck traffic might be a way to look.
Yeah, and there's a lot of interest in, I know because I attended the Capitol Hill Council meeting last night, and kind of in a listening phase right now. So I'm hearing a lot about some of the truck issues. It's related, right? What happens on 3rd West, the trucks that are impacting that community is related to 6 North and whole corridor. So, you know, I'm hearing you that that's an important thing that's affecting the community. And that's something that we want to consider how to affect positive change. We have lots of partners when it comes to interstates and regional mobility. That includes UDOT and the Wasatch Front Regional Council. And so projects like putting in a mid-block crosswalk are on several orders of magnitude difference than putting in interstate interchange, for example. And so considering the truck traffic is probably part of a longer term conversation, something we definitely want to be thinking about.
All right, so another question from Sean on Facebook. It would be great to have a green space that connects downtown to the Parkway. Is there a plan for this?
Well, green space is definitely something that we're talking about in all of our West Side projects. How can we incorporate more shade and greening? So that's definitely a design element that we're kind of looking at in our toolbox. I do know that there's a pedestrian bridge that's coming. It's been funded and it's in the works for 300 North, which creates another sort of connection for the I-15 and railroad corridor. So those are this project is an opportunity for that. 3rd North, an opportunity for that as well.
And I'd actually like to throw it out to our panel members, just what your thoughts are in terms of increasing more green space, especially connecting to the Parkway to create that network. Does anyone want to take a stab at that?
I was thinking that it would be a great opportunity to partner with the trails and parks and trails to see what we could do to connect.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I wanted to chime in. I remember from our previous discussions that we mentioned something like a gateway to the community, and I think a green space is definitely something that would be a very attractive and very appealing gateway into Rose Park for us to, for people to use coming into or out of the area.
Tim, I think you're muted.
Sorry, I think we've heard a lot about this. Is creating a better gateway often means creating more green space. Just one idea is to just create that more greener, more welcoming environment for people coming into the neighborhood, creating a better sense of place. All right, so a lot of people on Facebook are asking about traffic speed and enforcement, citing that as a primary concern that they have. Do people want to talk a little bit more about speed and enforcement of speed and how we lower the speed throughout this corridor, as well as, and we've also been looking at 500 North as well?
We talk about this a lot at the Transportation Advisory Board, and part of the issue is lack of manpower with the city patrol, and that can be an issue. So what is the priority? You know, so we need to really work with Salt Lake PD and try to figure out where we need the best manpower, how effective that will be, and if it's just a temporary fix. I know that the driver feedback signs make you more aware of what your speed is, but again, that can be one. Well, let's see how fast I can get the sign up, kind of thing, especially when you've got this beautiful wide road. So
yeah,
it's something that we really need to talk about.
Two things come to mind for me on this one. One, we've said this, we'll say it again, design really dictates behavior. So if you have really wide lanes and you can see down the road a long distance and there's nothing on the sides of you, nothing on the side of the road that you're worried about hitting, as a driver, that's how our interstates are designed. So those are the signals that encourage speeding. You know, but it occurs to me, you know, with everything that's going on socially right now, there's a lot of discussion right now about what do we want our police force to be doing and how do we want them to spend their time. You know, and I don't have the perfect answer for this, but I'm just reflecting on that and thinking, well, you know, if we could do the best job that we can do in designing this road in a way that discourages speeding, then we let the infrastructure do its job and then don't expect police force to be out giving tickets. Now, I'm not saying enforcement's not an important part of a functioning corridor, but you know, I just wonder, I question if that's the ultimate solution.
Yeah, we have the opportunity with this project to really go back to the foundation of the design of the street and really kind of address those issues so that we don't necessarily have to use Band-Aid type solutions on this corridor. So we'll be looking to see, you know, how we can kind of might have the opportunity to fundamentally create a new design for the street that would just encourage people to drive a little bit more slowly.
And I think as you look at the design, the important part of that is at each intersection that it forces people to slow down. I know that I live in Fair Park, and along 600 West, NeighborWorks worked closely with residents there to put in probably the last roundabouts that the city allowed, and the traffic went from 50 miles an hour on this little neighborhood to still it's kind of fast 30, but because they're on 2nd North, 4th North, and 5th North, people have to slow down. So I think design is incredibly important at the intersection so they don't have just a straight drive through with that speed. I think as you think about that, take that into consideration.
Great. So we've got another question from Paul on Facebook. Are there not noise ordinances that can be enforced? A lot of them have modified their engines to be louder and use their air brakes while driving through neighborhoods. That's the biggest issue. I'm not sure if this is referring to trucks specifically, but give companies citations and to make them reduce noise pollution.
My sense is this rule is related to the commercial truck traffic.
Yeah.
In the years. I don't fully understand it. It's some kind of engine compression braking system that makes a lot of noise. This is something that I'm learning about as we speak. You know, informed by the conversation we had just last night at the Capitol Hill neighborhood meeting. So I don't have an answer to this. It's something that I'm interested in looking into more. I don't know if other folks on the panel.
I know that there are some communities that have they have signs up that engine brakes are not allowed because of the noise. I've seen that as I've traveled in different areas. And I also think on top of the truck noise, there are a whole lot of people that have tricked out their cars and are doing drag racing. So it's not just the trucks, but the trucks are a big problem. But I don't know what we'd need to do to get engine brakes restricted along that corridor, but it would certainly be worth looking into.
Do you guys have a sense that if putting up just basic signage, they're restricted? Does that will drivers comply with that?
Truck drivers probably would. I don't know about the drag racers.
All right. So next question is Stephanie on Facebook. How will this tie in with Inland Port? Are we going to see more heavy traffic? Is planning taking that into consideration? How to minimize that? The traffic from the Inland Port. Anyone want to take a stab at this one?
Yeah.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe long trucks are prohibited west of 900 West or 10th West. So, I mean, I don't see, unless there's a change to that, I don't see there being much impact specifically on 600 North for, you know, an increase in heavy trucks.
I mean, there is also, you know, 700 North essentially ends at 2200 West, and you know, there's not a huge connection to that kind of larger inland port area. I think that 215 interchange sees less, you know, truck activity than the I-15 interchange, but it's something that we're definitely keeping in mind and considering for sure.
Yeah, I think given also the sort of geographic location, or I mean, I know that they've got a strip right along I-215, which would touch 7th North. But a lot of those land uses, like the National Guard and aviation uses, I don't know if they're actually going to change. I think they've included them in its designation to be part of the Inland Port Authority, but I don't necessarily, I don't know this, but I suspect that the land uses are not going to intensify along that strip of the Inland Port that touches this corridor. So in that case, you wouldn't expect additional trips coming to and from the area as a result specifically of Inland Port. Broader boundary, which is closer to 5600 West. I don't know exactly what the plans are there for intensification, but one would think access to that site would be facilitated more by I-80.
All right, so next question. What is the timeline for engagement and how are you reaching a wider audience? What methods of engagement are you using for this project? Is this Facebook Live it? With the concern that many work during the day on the west side, how do you plan to reach out to the community during this project feedback phase?
Hey, Tim, I'm going to answer that question. So as part of our engagement tactics, we have a hotline, and I'll be happy to share that either on our Facebook conversations and also on this. That hotline is 801-535-6630. People can call us there at any time and either leave a message or request that a hard copy of our survey can be mailed out to them. We'd love to be able to reach out to them in whichever way it's possible. We also have an email address, which is 600north@slcgov.com. That email address is 600north@slcgov.com. So we can either receive emails or calls or voice messages. And yes, the survey is available online, but for those that don't have online access, they can give us a call and we'll be more than happy to mail them a hard copy of the survey so that they can get it back to us, right? And so please reach out to us. Now is the time to get involved. As we continue to make decisions, we'll continue to have forums like these to share our progress with the community, with our community councils, and some of the community representatives that are here today. So there's really no reason for anyone not to know what's going on. COVID-19 presents a bunch of different challenges that we didn't have before, but we're happy to overcome those. But we also need the public's participation and proactivity on their part to reach out to us so that we can give them the information that they need. So again, our offices right now are sort of closed, and so it's a little challenging for people to come in and say grab a hard copy or a printed copy of the survey. But again, if they give us a call, leave us a message, we'll be happy to call you back, get your contact information, and we'll mail you a hard copy via regular mail.
And Tim, the only thing I would add to that is that NeighborWorks pushes it out to those communities who are not always invited to the table to make sure that they have an opportunity to respond. So whatever the city passes on to us, we pass out to those communities.
Terrific. No, that's all terrific information. And I will say that, we had a we had a community event planned for this stage, and we were going to have food. It's going to be a really fun event in this, early summertime, late spring. And so it's a bummer that we weren't really able to do that with COVID-19. So we're trying to just find the other good ways, a diversity of ways to reach people. And I think Adon really covered it. Yeah, postcards.
Put out some posters over the corridor. We're doing presentations at community council meetings. Yeah, so it's not perfect given the context of the situation of things, but we're definitely trying, and we'll continue to be broadcasting different opportunities or intervals, things like this. This is gonna be recorded, put on our website. That's another way that folks, those schedules don't line up, can still get access to the information is by watching some of these recorded events.
We've got a lot more questions, but we're kind of need to wrap up here. We're coming to the end of our time. So watch the Facebook, and we'll answer questions there as best we can. And thanks for everyone's questions. These are great. There's a lot of really important issues along this corridor. But do we want to wrap things up with some closing thoughts?
So talk to your community councils, talk to your neighbors, especially with this kind of stuff, to get more information out there so that we can get everybody's thoughts and concerns and make sure that everybody feels that they are having a voice, having a seat at the table. There are a lot of avenues to get this information to people, especially in our neighborhood where so many people rely on the libraries that are closed and they don't have access to the internet and that sort of thing. Maybe push through with the schools informations. We've got there's our elementary schools have networks where we can talk to the families that maybe give them better access to this sort of information as well. So there are a lot of avenues, but if you know of anybody that needs to talk about it, that wants to express their concerns, have them get in contact with us one way or the other, because
Great.
We're all here to help.
And I would just add to what Corky said and put in a plug for being involved in your community councils, being involved online. I can't tell you how many projects we have worked on over the years where people have come in at the last minute and said, well, I didn't know anything about that. These guys have done a great job of trying to reach out. It's especially complicated right now, whereas we're not having live meetings and we can't do our festival as we've always done. They were going to be at that, and but we are trying to be very active online. The city has great online opportunities to express opinions about things. So I just encourage everyone out there to please talk to your neighbors about getting involved, both online and at community council meetings, and be involved and pay attention to what's going on, because you do have a say in what happens in our neighborhood.
And I would just encourage everyone to visit the project website. There's a lot of great detail in the document that's been published. We need that feedback to see if there are any gaps. So please get involved, as you've heard us say, but visit the project website, check out the detailed information that's there, and send your feedback to Kyle or Tim.
Great. Thanks, guys.